And so, from both sides of the room, at my first open mic, Dan and Kristen converge on me. Kristen wrote it down one time. It was very good, or what happened for me. And they encouraged me to the point where I decided to park my truck outside the Snake and Weasel, and I lived out there for several months. And then Dan finally gave me a key, and he comes up to me and he says, "You know what? You're already living here. You might as well have a key to the place. Respect it. Don't abuse this." And so I moved into the Snake, and I slept in the couch in the back office, and I slept in the couches in the back. You know, I'd pull the shades down at night, and sometimes I'd turn the PA on. I'd sit on the stage and I'd play at night and learned a bit about sound and started carrying people's instruments in. And I got to meet everybody that played in there, and a lot of them signed my guitar and stuff. And from there, I ended up getting to move into Dan's house and live in his basement. And my job in life was to go be a street performer every day and hand out performance guides. And I saw there were some performance guides here tonight. And I'd go play on the streets down at Pioneer Square on the west side and invite people to come over to the east side to that venue. And it was tough then, it was a bit of a hard life, I guess. And I was working for free, basically. But as it turned out, there were benefits that came down the road from that, that I couldn't see then. But I wanted to quit many times, no doubt about it. And Dan encouraged me more than anybody in my life. I remember one time I was at Pioneer Square, and I'm standing up on the wall, and I'm jamming. I've been down there most of the morning, then it was about lunchtime. And then Vera Katz, she was the mayor in Portland, and she came by with two henchmen and saw me standing up on the wall and came and stood right in front of me, and I didn't know what to do, and I reached in my back pocket and I pulled a performance guide out and I handed it to her, and I said, "Hey, the best music in town is at the Snake and Weasel," and I gave it to her, and she took it. And one of the guys standing next to her took it from her and started looking at it, and then they both kind of walked away. And the next year they enacted the sit-lie law, where you couldn't stand on the wall like I was doing anymore. And no, I don't know. I might have had a hand in that, for all I know, But I remember this one afternoon. I remember being in the pub with Dan. It was early one morning, and he came in. He wasn't an early guy, but he came in and was making sure I was mopping the floors and keeping everything right, like getting the place set up right in the mornings. And he says to me, like, "Where are you going to go play today? Are you going to go up to the Pearl? Are you going to Hawthorne?" And I go, "I'm going down to Pioneer Square." He's like, "Well, I'll see you down there today." I was like, "What for? What are you coming down?" He's like, "I want to see you play down on the streets." And I was like, "Oh, that's kind of weird." I was a little flattered. I didn't think it would happen. And then I hand the shift over to Mark, who was a bartender at the Snake, and I catch a bus and I go downtown and I set up, and I'm at Pioneer Square, and I was playing for an hour or two, and I happened to look over by Nordstrom's, and there's Dan Coleman sitting in a lawn chair watching me, and he sat there with a coffee, drinking it and just smiling. And I remember it was just the happiest moment I had, because I never had that kind of encouragement from anybody in my life. And then I remember he gets up and he had a little bag with him, and he comes walking over to me and he hands me this stack of performance guides from the Snake and Weasel, and he said, "Don't come home until you give all these away." and he walks off. And I had so many great moments with Dan. I was riding a train down today. I was thinking about the times I had and whatnot, and I started crying again. I've cried a lot since Dan passed away, and I realized for myself that a lot of the sadness that I was experiencing wasn't exactly in Dan passing. It was because of all of these private moments that just him and I shared. And I felt like that when Dan went to the next life, like now I'm the only one holding the bag on all those memories. And it was heavy. It was profound for me, and I felt like a part of myself died with Dan. But I slowly began to realize that that's really not the case. That Dan lives on in my heart, and he definitely saved my life, and was the biggest motivator in me going on to do music, and it went on from there to doing events and teaching me about the music business and booking, and I got to learn house sound, and I got to rub shoulders with a lot of his friends and people that helped put on events like Matt Chamberlain and David Santee, and people that were with Dan before I got there that were totally committed, and I didn't know why, and they weren't making any money out of it, and I didn't get it. But slowly I started to get it. As Dan created this amazing world, that only select people were involved in. He was pretty picky. Like, you couldn't just show up and want to help out and it would be okay. He was pretty selective about that. And it's wonderful for me to come out here and see a few of you guys here. So